with what she's saying. She telling you what she telling you. She got a cleaver in her right hand. Right? She got a hippopotamus, the protective mother, in the mammary glands of a woman. That's Big Mama. Right? All of these are tied to the original zodiac, which comes from the totem systems of using totem animals to read energy in the environment.
Right.
So these zodiac animals came from the totem animals of the original tribes of the earth tribes, of which there's 12 daughters of Isis, meaning 12 feminine bloodlines of mitochondria. Right? And they all been interrupted by several different Y chromosome intercepts that produce birth defects that was did on purpose in laboratories in Sumer. Right? Now that they got the birth defect, the only remedy is the original blood, one drop doctrine. Because Enki wrote the genome, he knew what to write to clean it up in the splicing program. Right? So when they talking about the story's fictional aspect, it's religious. But when you talk about its actual aspect, it's metaphysical and it's science and it's a star map. And it don't got nothing to do with what you believe. It got everything to know with how well can you read the signs.
Powerful, powerful. You know, so you're talking about the zodiac, Rod, and Seven put up the picture of the temple of Dendera. You know, oh, man, as we say, this is a divine costume that we're wearing down here. Macabre, there's many names for the vessel.
Earth rover.
Earth rover, you know, we call it different names. In the spiritual community, a lot of us study sciences such as astrology, numerology, things like that. And, you know, these sciences tell us certain things about who we are. But my question to y'all is, some of us are very old souls. Say, for example, Brother Rich, I might have existed before the sun, moon, and stars even was around. I might have been one of them souls that was around way before the sun, the moon, the stars, Saturn, scary ass Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, all that shit. I might have been around before all of that. Now, if I was around and souls like me were around before all of that, are we subjugated to the same rules of astrology as a soul who came around after these planetary bodies existed? Or do the rules completely change for souls that were around before this certain things in the matrix even came about?
Look, Michael Jordan was 12 years old. You think he could have beat Dr. J in the pickup game? One-on-one?
When he was 12, no.
Okay, now, when he was 30, right, and you squared him up against Dr. J, now Dr. J is aged, right? And this is the continuation and the passing on of energy. Because Dr. J aged, if he could beat Jordan when he was the same age as Jordan was when he was 13, when he becomes 30 now, he's that much older than Jordan. So now all of his senses is declining because of something called age. Right? So we looking at a baton passed to self. When you're talking about an individual soul, that's always has to be filtered through an ego. Because when you're not in the physical form, there is no one of us. We are unison. We are together. We the great egregore of consciousness that is creation. But when we take on a physical form, we encapsulate all that into an ego. And the old souls just learn how to use the ego to its advantage better than the new souls. And we called the new souls the snakes, but the old souls was the dragons. The great, terrible lizards, because they can control the manifestation potentialities of this physical form so good they became spooky and scary like goblins and goons. Mm-hmm. But that was just another representation of the potency of their power. Mm-hmm. Right? So now we come in with the old souls clearing the way for the new souls to come in as the indigo race, which is not going to have anything to do with ethnicity, and it's going to have everything to do with which crystal you control your bloodline. Right? And it's going to be 12 major crystals, and the minor crystals fall under the major crystals, the trickle-down effect. All of it is tied together. So the old soul's responsibility is to come and live the life to teach the new souls how to live life. Because we're not given an instruction manual at birth, we given amnesia instead. You muted, Rich.
No, I said, wow, yeah, talk to him. We giving amnesia instead. That's powerful. God damn it, that's powerful.
So how they gonna learn how to live?
Yeah.
If the family is broken, the individual psyche is broken as he develops. So he's already developing from a broken perspective. So you give them misinformation, the perspective is broken, then you flip the map on them, tell them that south is down and north is up, when it's exactly the opposite. Which twists their east-west orientation. It's subconsciously disorienting the subconscious, so the conscious mind can't navigate the 3D realm without somebody telling it where to go. You need borders set up. You need the velvet ropes to tell you how to walk down on the red carpet, right? But the wild man of the jungle can walk the path without a trail, right? And then he can come back and get everybody else and show them where is the destination. And this is when your old souls come in, and the difference from what they do versus, they let the young souls train themselves by trial and error. In this case, the youngest souls took on pale skin. So they had to go through a catharsis due to something called an Iceman inheritance, which developed the psychopathic racial personality. You know I'm dropping receipts while I'm talking, right? Them books that explain the whole philosophy of what I'm saying in detail. I just quoted by the title of the book so that the book can give you the further background. Because they don't be knowing I be dropping receipts, but some of the people will look up something I'm saying, and then they'll be able to follow the receipts. So the only way to get rid of the traits that the ice inheritance produces is catharsis. Mm-hmm. Right? But somebody got to be strong enough to endure the suffering of the cat's paw, because they ain't running nothing. They just put up as the fall guy, the Coach Sievers, the stunt man, the crash dummy. And then the ones behind it is telling us kill Whitey, but this nigga Whitey. He the one wrote in the law that white was a Moor. They didn't write it. It's his contract that we following. Right? They just reaping the rewards, being put in the position to go through the catharsis to purge themselves of the wickedness as they assimilate one drop of blood.
Okay. Seven, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, because these things, they get really deep. When we really go there, what we're talking about is taking place even outside of time, even thousands and thousands of years of different levels of entities actually taking their sides in either exploiting the situation and furthering the building of the foundation on top of mother, no matter, what the cost is, continuously harvesting different levels of the souls that are here and keeping them in the game longer than they really should be, longer than the lesson. But sometimes, at the end of the day, we also see how everybody's gotten so strong in all of this. Like, I really wanted to just add some of the linguistic references, because what he's speaking on, you can also take a dream space and actually interact with your multiple selves, multiple aspects of the ancestors, multiple aspects of the archetypes, in order to be able to discern truth from falsehood, because truly that's what in the end this starts to become about. That's why I always say in the end what remains will be the truth. Because now if this lesson served any purpose, which I believe it serves many, I actually do believe the ancestors cooked up a hell of a sim. It set on hard, but these are the rights. I feel like that even our ancestors had it definitely way more, way more going on, because these are the rights anyway. You being tried by fire, you being tried for honesty, you being tried for, these are the rights anyway that one is put through in the rearing process. And, I believe heavily that many of our ancestors are like trees, that we're all seeded and then we're growing up. But then, of course, just like the parable of the sower, some of the seeds, they wilt. Some of the seeds, they get corrupted. And, that's also all part of the game. And, but it's also very important from a maturity level to still realize when some of that knowledge or some of those ideas or things are creeping up on you and kind of persuading you to do things that affect your big time. Because right now still, they talk about the body being limited in certain ways, but it's where we're at right now. It's the control point in which we're one of the control points in which we're operating from. So what we do here, even in something called the game, they call it the game because there's characters, not because it's not serious and what you do doesn't have repercussions. But I still believe the whole process is to really refine and train the souls that are actually coming through it, as long as the guides and the way showers are, still on the path, because every child that even came into this to a certain degree, at least, needed some kind of upbringing. And the better upbringing that child has still actually creates a better being. I know a lot of us have become strong from going through a lot, but when we even see now this new generation, like even, Rich's kids, they're growing up with a father because Rich knows how important it is to actually be there. We just went over a whole session where the father was like, yo, I'm trying to have a baby with the whole world, I'm trying to repopulate the entire kingdom. So, this kind of restoration at the basic level, the family unit and the structures and the ideals in which we believe is really where the great transformation has got to come from anyway, right? So, I just wanted to add that, man. It's just, I'm enjoying the bill. I'm in it. I'm flux.
And Rod, and I hear a lot of people talk about this rebellion against the great mother and this divine feminine energy. And, if I'm a bad guy and I'm rebelling against this divine feminine energy, I got to look at the most powerful part of this realm, of this matrix, of this game. And the most powerful part, what animates this thing, is something that we call the sun. So I'm gonna automatically make the sun masculine. Now, even in the conscious spiritual community, we call the moon feminine and the sun masculine. So what role was how much more of a feminine role did the sun play before this rebellion, if any? Is the sun, should we start looking at it as mother sun? Like talk to me about femininity.
We use these terms like mother, but there's female pumas, to be honest. But we could say, hey, it's half of the way, meaning the masculine aspect. You would still have to get that feminine aspect in order to be a dynamo. Like, I don't see the sun specifically as a woman, but a dynamo, a being that actually is capable of having what you would say is the masculine and feminine pose, and a neutral in that case, all encompassed within the same force. Like something that, as we said, it's like it manifests as parthenogenesis. It manifests as hermaphroditic when it enters into the physical plane, because it can self-generate itself. And so, and then that removes, notice what that would do though, that removes the Eve angel, which is where, like I'm saying, the priestcraft all the way up to what you would even say the extraterrestrials are always trying to get in between and broker the energy. And again, to make it like everybody is good, I think you got to understand that this goes beyond good and bad. You have different beings in play, ushering souls, brokering energy, moving stuff around. But this is also really about your awareness. How aware are you? When your eyes open and you realize what's going on, then you will be able to step in as intercessor for yourself. And then you will go to what you would feel more as a feminine energy, because there's a masculine force. But the lessons are like, it's a bit jaded. That's another conversation. But when you go to the feminine force, it's gentle, it's peaceable, it demands the purity, meaning like, it's almost like, hey, you can't be with no other girls. But we'll say girls just means any other distractions, any other things. You can't be with no other girls but me as I go through this process with you and you gain this wisdom. You see what I mean? So this is in that way, a gentle and a peaceable spirit that takes one through having a counselor, something that 3 a.m. it's already going in, tumbling the last wheel of what was already being brought forth as the next level of your learning. What I feel like is when one doesn't have that activation of that feminine side, the wheels don't turn that way. There be something else talking. And we would discuss this. They set up altars in the mind, the whisperer and the language complex, et cetera. It'd be something else talking, but it's not that divine voice that actually is leading one to their true north, leading one through that process that they need to go through. So it's a mother and a father. That's why you look at the Mommy Waka books, right? And, they show, when they show the sister, especially when you go further into the book, they show you like Dionysus is the cognate of one of the Sibyllines. But that doesn't mean she was going to come in a size 6, looking like Wonder Woman, so that a lot of times even the vision of the ancient mothers, a hippopotamus is the most dangerous, you know what I mean? But you may look at it and be like, I think the lion. No, but it's there. So what I'm getting at here is that the forces in themselves, they try and they test you for how much not you say you really believe in them or you connect with them, but how much that you actually do connect with them and make that effort. And I haven't seen any person that made that effort that didn't get an answer. And so I feel like that, that's absolutely special because all of this interference with the next thing that's in front of your face saying, hey, I'm God. I believe that's a natural trial that we all have to go through and pass at some stage in our journey. Right. And so I'm not really, I often go back and forth in my own mind about, when you give advanced levels of knowledge, in many ways, you're preventing a person from doing things that maybe otherwise they would have done. Right. You're giving them wisdom so that they avoid some disaster. This is what your parents do. I encourage us always to keep doing that because in many ways, the person is still going to have to make the decision themselves, choose if they really even want to do it or not, or when they want to do it. So there's still a lot more decision making that goes on, despite that you can tell the person the exact knowledge and wisdom of what is happening here in the planet. It's no different than when our mothers was telling us, hey, don't go out and do this, and hang out with him. And then the next thing we was out with him. You see what I mean? That's a big part of how this is all structured. It's still everything that's happening. We're witnessing in the family structure and what goes on even in our lives. When you say, hey, that rebellious son, I can't even say that I was definitely not the rebellious son at some point. I wanted to get out the house. So all these archetypes are still built into the family structure and still actually happening to cause and effect within the world. And we have to also pay attention to, just to that and what roles these things play in that scheme of things.
I want to ask y'all. First of all, shout out to everybody. We got about 4,200 people in the chat. Shout out to everybody in the chat. It's one of them shows. It's a historical show. It's groundbreaking. This is something that people didn't even see coming. You know what I'm saying? But, Radiohead Rich, I'm tuned into frequencies. They said, I talked to 7. Listen, I was scheduled to do a show with 7. Then I was on the phone with Rod or something happened with Rod. I'm like, wait a minute. I said, wait a minute. Maybe I should get Rod and 7 together. Because Rod talks about 7. Rod be like, yeah, shout out to 7, blah, 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 blah. I said, wait a minute. Maybe I should get Rod and 7 together on the show. So I asked her, I said, 7, you cool with it? 7 said, hell yeah. Let's go. Let's get it. I'm ready. So that's how it happened. But legendary. Oh man, amazing show so far. We just passed the hour mark. We're gonna go to the next hour. We're gonna keep it moving to the next hour. Let me ask y'all this, all right? We're talking about the divine feminine, and I started thinking about ancient civilizations. I thought about, when our ancestors were strictly telepathic, no speech, right? Now, I'm saying that to say, let me just preface that. We know if we could compare it to what we've been through in this realm on this time, we know when the text messages came around, we know when the cell phones came around, things that was in our head, the way we used to communicate with people changed. The communication got lost. We're not close with people like we used to be. When we had to make phone calls and we had to see them, or we had to remember phone call or phone numbers and things that we have a reference points. Oh shit changed when text messages came out, when cell phones came around. We have a reference point. In terms of telepathic civilizations, I'm guessing that's when all this shit went astray, when things changed, when we're talking about all this rebellion and everything, is when we started using language, because one of the main purposes of language, people use that shit to lie. We lie like a motherfucker. We lie to ourselves, we lie to each other, we lie to family, we lie to friends, we just lie. But you have to be intuitive to know what's the intention behind somebody's language. So what I'm asking you with that being said, around what time period? Because I'm trying to track this, just like I could track around 2000 text messaging came around and cell phones came around 1999, 2000. What civilization did we go from telepathic to communication with our mouth? Because maybe that's when we could track. Oh, that's when the shit went from the divine feminine. That's when motherfuckers started lying and rebellion against all the internal, spiritual, intuitive senses that we once had. When did this split happen between telepathy and the spoken word?
You remember when Seven was talking about the language of the women that they didn't let the men speak?
Yeah.
This the language.
What, telepathic?
Yeah. The women got a network. And the network is predicated up on the frequency on mitochondria. They all psychically connected. And that's why a lot of them, they don't know what's going on. They end up in psych hospitals because they're hearing all of the women chattering them psychic channel. Shit. And they think they crazy. Yeah. Right? It's part of the symbols. When you understand that the symbols used to be able to consciously telepathically talk to each other, the symbols became the priestesses of the Delphi, or the oracles of the Delphi, right? And before that, though, they was the goddesses in ancient Kemet. They was the great Inanna and Erishkigal, etc. in Sumer. But the usurping of the divine feminine is the cause of the last ice age. This is what caused us to go through the ice age. There was a nuclear winter from a nuclear holocaust. And there was a Anunnaki war. It's in a book called the Vamanas Wars in India. Then the Vamana Sutras is what the name of it is. And they tell you about the crafts that was fighting back then. Right? They talk about it in the Sumerian tablets as well. And then they tell you in a lot of fictional stories about the Anunnaki, key bits of truth sprinkled through a fictional narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I was just showing the epic Atrahasis here because it's breaking down some of those conflicts, but even also putting in space that the Great Mother was the one who formulated even the first humans, mixing them with the God and with the beings that are here on earth, as far as this coming from the text. And, continuously expressing that the schism, as our brother is saying, the schism that's continuing to happen is because there is still a conflict, if you may, for the throne of consciousness.
Indeed. Yeah. This is some powerful stuff, family. I want to ask now. let me put my camera back on. I'm loving your references as Rod is talking. This is what's powerful. As Rod is talking, Seven's coming up with these images, and it's like a documentary. Like Rod's talking, and we see these ancient images. Like, this is good stuff. What you got there, Seven?
It's a real time documentary too, because
oh yeah.
I just want to point out also that I still find it kind of fascinating that humanity thinks that when it finally finds, let's say, these beings, because they got it now slated that God's going to show up, I guess, in some spacecraft or he's just going to part the clouds, that it's actually going to look like the 3D version of the human now, which I think is a gross mistake, especially with what has already been uncovered in Angkor Wat. and how the temples in Angkor Wat are pointed to Draco, while the temples in the pyramids, of course, we have pyramids pointed towards Orion. But you're seeing amphibians and you're seeing reptilians. You're seeing humans with like the holes that, that lizards have and snakes have on the side. You're seeing breasts, you're seeing elongated heads. And, so basically what I'm saying is from the accounts, when you go back to quote unquote, you keep going down those ancestral lines, you get really fast into these more of what we would say is first, what they say, the first strand of the DNA, the genetics of the reptilian strand, which they still use. And Rod could break this down because he's studying this genetics, but they use this reptilian DNA even to this very day when they're building a DNA stack. They go to that first reptilian zygote and they start constructing from there. And so, it's really, that's why, the mind has to also be very broad, because this kind of system, and this is like, we're seeing something that looks our size. There's so many accounts, even of the ones in Britain and London being giants. And so when we even put a larger pineal gland, like I said, we remove, like Rich saying, we remove phones and even we remove languages. We have beings that are always tapped into that all there is, because there is no distraction. And, one of the things that was pointed out was how the gods, kind of got a little perturbed of all the noise coming from the humans. And this is, marked in some of the Sumerian texts. Some insight said that was because when the humans start to think things that were outside of even what the quote unquote supreme beings, gods, would be thinking, this was noisy because we were all tied into the same wavelength. But even the ideas of the males, as it was saying, and just so everybody understands, from the Dogon tradition, it's noted that anytime they went through the birthing process, they birthed in perfection. They made sure that, hey, this being is coming out balanced, or else they removed the being. And that may seem very cruel to you, but since, there's that side and this side, if something comes out over here and it's not perfected, they seen that as a failed experiment. So in many ways, the way that the male is configured is seen by the ancient matriarchs as being somewhat of a disfigurement, not somewhat, but a disfigurement within the genome, right? So the males were in that way not necessarily shined upon anyway as being the most powerful. That wasn't the role. And so I believe Dan still kind of gets this story better than most. And this, of course, is Dan Winter, is to explain again how even the Asa Uru and the Anunnaki begin to move away from the hive that they were connected into. Because all we've been talking about is that, hey, all these beings are on the same wavelength. When you get to the next level, you're on the same wavelength. But that same wavelength is also what we would even seem to call instinct, what we would even seem to call the hive at times. But this wavelength will also always keep you in balance as we're moving through whatever we're moving through. But there were many who desired to remove themselves from that, to basically cut their umbilical cord. Right. And so we find, again, that the rebellious son did go a bit further with its own world and setting up, because it has a certain level of power. But that power is like half magic. It's like the reason why the sun is not out 24 hours a day, and the reason why we have this quote unquote distortion, imperfection, evil, etc. Versus there's no sunset for the sun. You know what I mean? It's always, if you was on it, because it looked like a boat when you open the third eye and you look at it, it looks like it's moving. And everything is going with it, and you're being left in the land, the darkness, if you may, when you see it with the third eye. And so it's more of like, hey, are you going to join in with this everlasting, which is why the love frequency, it's like, it's still a choice. You could love or hate. And you got people really hating. And you can see how ignorant that is, because like, man, wouldn't you want to love, right? But it also lets you know how deep the game is, because even the things that would seem like common sense, like, yo, lift each other up instead of breaking each other down. Yo, stop assassinating everybody, giving them a life sentence. Yo, give them stop worrying and fighting. All those things are not as common. And so thus, I feel like that this is also a place, because they equate it a lot with Sirius, and Sirius's other name is weight, right? And it kind of even lets us know, because we get the scales and we get even a planet called weight, or a celestial body called weight. that balancing out in these kind of things is very important to the ancestors. Judging and judging righteously and this kind of thing is very important to the ancestors. So it's almost like everything that we go through and everything that we experience, what we get from it, it will be what we earned. And there will be like no cheating or no other way. And, you know, you may even see rich people, but then if you could be inside of their mind, you would see that they're living in the greatest level of terror. There's a whole veil over them. They can't see anything. You know, if you time traveled in the mind of somebody rich, you probably would be stuck in their mind because you wouldn't have enough knowledge to figure out how to get out of them. You see what I mean? So there's so many things that are happening inside of the space. And then there's even more things happening inside of us. And the only one that we really have the most control over is this one. And so the lesson here, even for every being, woman and man, because, you know, woman is also here, but woman has another part to gain to her too. That's a whole nother story. But it's like we all have this process of we either inherit the gift, which was already given. We were already given the life. Now we're going through the lesson. If we're going to do this again, like somebody say, hey, we come back. The jury to me is still out on that. I feel like sometimes when you look at DNA and all this stuff, it seems like almost like a roll of the dice. And if you could get into a life where you can at least comprehend what is going on and you can even see what you need to do for your body and this makes sense, it's like seize that life. Don't wait until like, oh, well, you know, maybe I'll come back on the next life and then, or maybe when I leave out of here, they all have me. And it's like really make that effort so that way you're just going above and beyond. You know, I just wanted to, you know, just add that in because, you know, when we really push ourselves to go above and beyond, we actually see all of these connections. We see all these masters and teachers. And, you know, if we push ourselves into that direction of where we're failing all the lessons, we get a chance to also see how low this thing really goes. And it doesn't appear that there's a bottom or a top to it as far as where you can end up, right? So, yeah.
You know, and I want to go this direction with everything that's been said so far. And I know Seven's going to love this question because he's into AI. So I know he's going to love this question. I've had this talk with, I had a talk with Robert Edward Grant. I had to talk with Robert Edward Grant about this. And I might have mentioned this to Rod Hayes because me and Rod have done several shows about, you know, radio heads and all this type of stuff. And I think personally, this is what I think, and I want to get y'all opinion on it. And I'll talk, like I said, I talked to Robert Grant about this. I think that it's a misnomer for us to say that we create reality. Why do I say that? And the reason why I bring that up, because that's one of the biggest phrases in the spiritual community. I create my reality. I create my reality. I create my reality. That's one of the biggest things we want to do down here is create our reality. I think it's a misnomer to say that. Why? I've said several ways. I explained it several ways, but I'm explaining the AI way now since I got Seven on here. So Seven. So they just came out with Sora, right? And they got AI. You know Sora, right? And they use AI. Now, Sora and AI, in order to come up with a picture, they don't create it. They generate that picture from source material. They need source material. It's not like they just create it. You say it and they just come up with it. They generate that image from source material. So they're not creating it. They're generating an image from something that already exists. What I'm saying, Seven, is that we create reality from source material. I mean, we generate reality from source material. We don't just create it out the dim blues. It already exists. We're coming up with things that already exist, and we're generating an image from our brain through our eyes, and we're looking at it. So, in my opinion, Seven and Rod, when we say we create our reality, it causes stress on our ego because we think we got extra work to do. If we realize that the shit was already created and we just got to generate it from something that already exists, it eliminates a lot of stress. So I'm comparing what we do to AI. AI generates reality from source material. We generate reality from the source material that already exists in the quantum field. So talk to me about generating reality versus creating reality, which is the phrase we all use in the spiritual community.
So, you know, they talk about the collective unconscious, right? Where all of the minds are connected.
Yeah.
And the reality that we all agreeing on, go to the double slit experiment.
Mm-hmm.
The observer causes the wave to become a particle, which is the solidified three-dimensional expression of what you observe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Einstein called it spooky action at a distance when he noticed that creation was responding to the fact that he was the observer at the source of creation. And as he perceived it, it started to manifest and it confused him. Right? Because this is where you get the concept that we all co-creators of this reality. We have expectations of what we are going to see. And the more unified the agreement to see that expectation manifest, the more likely you is to wake up to that new reality. This is why they say we co-creators with the creator. The generating from source material that AI does, it's just printing based on a set of codes. We are using what's called mind power to affect what's called prima matter, which the Egyptians called noon waters, the sacred waters of creation. And as we look into the water, like Narcissus, remember he looked into the water and fell in love with himself. That was all ego. So you said that thinking like this can damage the ego. That's the goal. Bust the ego so that the inner divinity can shine into the world. So you become your own individual sun. As you walk through the world, let that light in you shine in the world. That's what they're talking about. But you got to get past the ego. The ego is all built by the world around you. It's not the true self. Bust the ego upside the head. Right? When you purify the ego in mysticism, you become enlightened by your higher self assuming the driver's seat of the vehicle of the earth, the body. If the higher self is in control, you got access to higher self information that the lower self don't have access to. They call it psychic capabilities. And these psychic capabilities, when you understand how they work and begin to explain to you how we are co-creating with the creator, the creation that we creating in real time while we creating it. Right? So we are all source when we ain't in the physical body. Right? We have egos or character archetypes that's designed to harness the energy in a specific fashion.
Exactly. You know what? I want to speak on that right there, Rod, just right there. Even in a slightly different but the same way to put this, they always talk about how the reality is all made from the same thing, right? They just call it atoms. But then you got different stuff in front of you. So you're like, well, if it's all made of the same thing, how do I have these different things, right? And when we take that to a spiritual level from a creating, but really a co-creating level, because for sure the word creator is overused, like originating something. Remember, there's only one prima materia. And just like Rod is saying, what ego is good at doing is dividing everything. Right. Some the external ego as an like an external sun in a way of generating and separating. And there's always a new one. And you see what I mean? So this is also another way of seeing that, how still though, and this was just an experiment that was done linguistically that I had conducted, is seeing how many letters in the English language are actually the same as another letter in another language, like the B and the V in Spanish versus English.
Talk to me.
And then when you start putting the language back together and you run all of these, or what I call the cipher across every language, in the end, it'll tell you that based on this, there is only one word or basically one sound. And you're wondering, well, how could that be? Because we have all these different tones and sounds that we got coming out of our mouths right now.
Right.
what we're missing is that, but we also assigned, and this is something that we're doing, let's say mentally or inside of our consciousness, we've assigned a marker or a tag to every single thing that we're coming in experience with in real time. Mm-hmm. And what Rod is mentioning is that when we tap out of that, then we enter into that space where it's clear to see not only are we the creators of the reality, but we're actually the reality. It's like there is no, you put on the double slot experiment. You now become the observer and the observed in that way. And that's also what happens in spiritual journeys. That's also what happens when the third eye is open. You take the bufo, you blow way out of the body, you realize, oh man, I'm everything. And, and that all goes on. And then, at a certain point, you slam back down into the body, and that's proof. But we still also have to remember, not to bag on the Christians, but they're still yet to experience something like this. What they think that they will have to wait until the end of life to experience, which is basically, really seeing, there's a spiritual plane is overlaying this one. It's alive more than this one, which makes this one more of an illusion. It's highly energetic. You walk outside, you see the trees moving, you see maybe something else in the Argyle or the spaces in the spaces, basically a whole nother world. But then we come into the Matrix, and they ain't mentioned nothing about it. They still over here trying to figure out whether God is Santa Claus. You see what I mean? So it's a stark contrast. But it's to see these things like now, and that's why we call it word salad now, right? Because they can get on the Instagram and be like, and we're creators, and we're co-creating together, bringing in our vision and unity, and they go in with the words, right? Because that's only one part of it, though, right? It's got the words got to connect with the heart, and so all of these power languages, right? Because the power language is almost even like a symbolic Reiki. Once you speak the certain tone, it open up certain things in the reality. All depth level stuff, all grandma level. Don't sit on my couch. There's plastic. Don't talk when grown folks ain't talking to you. I'm gonna pop you in the mouth. Kind of deep level of things, right? You just sit and then you watch, and if you can, and then you learn. So all of that then starts evolving. Involving, that's why all of this physical reality stuff starts becoming petty. It starts being about what happens to generations over thousands of years, what happens with the migration of the souls and the merging of certain types of entities, so it's all, let's say, higher level stuff. So on the lower levels, we have, let's say, this language, and they even pointed it out, Arabic and Hebrew, because you got to understand what they do Kabbalistically, right? But they're just like these derivative languages. One is used to handle the government. One is used to handle the lowest layer of the spiritual world. The priestcraft use one language, and then the gubernatorial uses another language, and then tries to manage the people through that language. We grew up in that system. Now, we're coming into that awareness like, there was something that existed even before all of this. And then that's when we start getting into, hey, I'm the creator of my reality. That's something that you don't just say, though. You, of course, step into that, and then you realize, now I know what I'm talking about. And it hit me the other night. It was simply saying this. Mm-hmm. Did you know how every aspect of what you deal with in the reality is generally momentarily, like stimulus? Like at every moment, you're feeling like, hey, I'm going to go in here and talk to my daughter. Hey, I'm going to go in here and get on the show. Or hey, even the 7 from 10 minutes ago is basically gone. Like that was momentary. Right. Were we ever going to see that 7 again? You see me? So a lot of this stuff is, when you really just meditate on it, all the same thing. And then that thought sometimes will send you into like this into a frequency where it's just all of a sudden like, you know what I mean? It'd be just like that. That's what we call the codes to the matrix, because you could just be sitting in something and then it'll hit you with like, hey, don't you see it's all impulses? It's all fleeting. So that makes it all the same thing. Nothing. And then from that point, the whole reality be gone, and it feels good. You know what I mean? So this is, that constant growth. So yeah.
But even get what they right. So they became Skywalkers. They come down out of the trees, but they do it on their turns for ritual purposes. As in, they might come down for grounding rituals. I'm gonna go get some drink.
Oh yeah, hey, you dropping some juice, because I ain't never heard of the like I heard terms threw around like Skywalker this, Skywalker that, but I ain't never make a connection with there was some of our native tribes who actually went up in trees and started connecting these Skywalkers together and all their huts, and they make a lot of sense. And there's a whole bunch of shit just going on through my mind on other shit that I knew that I didn't put together about these people living up in these trees.
And that what we have been told or led to believe by mainstream media has been only there to confuse us, mislead us, and turn us on one another. So if we're going to ever get to a point of liberation, of freedom from all of this oppression, one thing we're going to have to do is get past jumping to assault each other openly and in public without cause, and no one's doing that to us. So what happens in the community is people begin to speak on things because it look a certain way. But if you understood the divide and conquer mechanism and how it works, you would know that the whole system is set up to turn us against each other. And when you start to mix the rules of the street with investigative reporting, you can ask the wrong questions that can get somebody severely hurt. And that's what made me bring up James Prince, because there was a situation similar to what young Pharaoh's doing with the nation in Farrakhan. He's not really understanding what he's doing, so I'm going to touch on some of it. But until I talk to certain people, I can't openly disclose a lot of information that I will be able to once I made those ends connect. So where we finna go with this is we're going to start with what happened with the Jay Prince scenario. All right. A few months back, James Prince released a tweet when one of his people was robbed in New York. And he told the people in Brooklyn, or he asked them rather, if any of them knew who this was, if this was their people, and to sit down with him or, check on it so that they can get an understanding. And I heard several different YouTube channels ask if James Prince was snitching by putting that tweet out. So everybody in the streets, I'm not talking about music industry types, I'm not talking about businessmen, I'm talking about anyone who is in the streets that deal with day-to-day street life. They will understand that what Jay Prince done was necessary. He had to address it publicly because the gentleman that did the robbery put it on social media publicly. If he doesn't say anything publicly about it and give the people who are the OGs in that area the opportunity to clean it up, then James Prince would not be following the rules. So what was James Prince doing? In the tweet,